When the Skrav corsairs breached the hull of the human freighter, they expected a quick surrender and a lucrative payday. They didn't know the ship was built by Lockheed Martin Stellar, and they certainly didn't know that humans don't just survive nightmares, they engineer them. Now, the predators are the prey. The USC Galileo drifted through the silent, frozen expanse of the outer rim, its heavy, sublight engines humming a low, steady rhythm. Registered to Fargo Orbital, a subsidiary of the massive Earth-based logistics conglomerate, the freighter was a brutalist piece of engineering. It lacked the elegant, sweeping curves of standard galactic vessels, resembling instead a massive rectangular block of tungsten and composite titanium. It was built for one purpose: moving heavy, dangerous cargo across hostile space. Captain Peyton Miller sat in the command chair, a lukewarm cup of synthetic coffee in his hand, watching the proximity sensors flare red. "Captain," said Dominic Harper, the ship's chief engineer, his fingers flying across his tactile analog keyboard, "we have a vessel approaching. Fast. Thermal signatures indicate plasma drives. It's a Skrav Corsair ship. They've painted us with targeting lasers." Peyton didn't flinch. He set his coffee mug into the magnetic holder and leaned forward, his gray eyes locked on the primary monitor. "Broadcast the standard Fargo orbital distress signal, Dominic. Let them know we are an unarmed commercial vessel carrying industrial equipment." They're ignoring the hail. Abigail Foster, the ship's tactical and cargo specialist, reported from the port console. "They are matching our velocity. Magnetic grapples deployed. We are being boarded." "Execute Protocol 4, Peyton ordered calmly. "Power down the main thrusters. Disengage the automated defense turrets. We offer no resistance." Dominic looked back, raising an eyebrow. "You sure about this, Cap? We have enough point defense kinetic cannons to shred their boarding tube." "And violate our insurance policy with Lloyd's of London Interstellar?" Peyton replied, a grim smile playing on his lips. "Fargo Orbital's mandate is clear. Preserve the cargo, preserve the crew. The Skrav rely on speed and shock value. If we don't fight, they won't shoot. We let them board, we let them take the bridge, and we wait." A shudder violently rocked the USC Galileo as the Corsair ship clamped onto the human freighter's hull. The terrifying hiss of plasma cutters eating through the outer airlock echoed through the ship's corridors. The Skrav were a notorious species in the sector, tall, chitin-plated bipeds with a predatory insectoid lineage. They possessed 4 arms, compound eyes, and a reputation for extreme violence. To them, humanity was a newly discovered, soft-skinned mammalian species that had barely clawed its way out of its own solar system. Soft, weak, perfect prey. The bridge doors blew open with a deafening bang. Plumes of gray smoke rolled into the room, followed immediately by 6 Skrav warriors. They wielded high-yield plasma rifles, their mandibles clicking rapidly in their native tongue. Leading them was Captain Growl, a towering specimen of his race, his dark purple chitin scarred from dozens of boarding actions. He stepped onto the bridge, his dual primary eyes locking onto Peyton. The alien translator collar around Growl's neck buzzed, emitting a synthetic, metallic voice. "You will not move, Terran. This vessel and its cargo now belong to the Skrav Syndicate. Any sudden movements will result in your immediate vaporization." Peyton slowly raised his hands, keeping his palms open and visible. Beside him, Dominic and Abigail did the same. "We are unarmed," Peyton said, his voice steady and measured. "I am Captain Peyton Miller of the USC Galileo. We surrender the ship. There is no need for violence." Growl let out a clicking, hissing laugh that sounded like dry leaves being crushed. "Sensible mammal. Your species is notoriously fragile. Bind them," he ordered his crew. 2 Skrav warriors lunged forward, roughly grabbing the humans. They slapped heavy, magnetic restraints onto their wrists. The aliens were fast, their movements twitchy and erratic, operating on a high-metabolism nervous system that made them lethal in short bursts. They shoved Peyton, Dominic, and Abigail toward the lift. "Take them to the lower cargo hold. Lock them in," Growl barked. "I want full control of this ship's systems within the hour. We jump to the Syndicate outpost as soon as the nav computer is ours." As Peyton was shoved into the elevator, he caught Dominic's eye. The engineer gave a microscopic, almost imperceptible nod. The humans were marched down into the bowels of the USC Galileo, deep into the heavy reinforced containment sectors built by Boston Dynamics' Stellar Division. The Scrav shoved them into a bleak, tungsten-lined storage unit and slammed the heavy blast door shut. The magnetic locks engaged with a heavy, final thud. Back on the bridge, Growl settled into the captain's chair. It was incredibly uncomfortable. The cushion was too dense, and the physical dimensions of the console were built for a species with entirely different joint articulations. But Growl didn't care. He had just secured a massive human freighter without firing a single shot. "Sir!" one of his technicians hissed, its 4 hands trying to navigate the human computer terminal. "The operating system is primitive. It is not using standard galactic light logic. It is built on rigid binary code, and there are physical, analog switches for everything." "Bypass it," Growl demanded. "Hook your personal data pad into the primary interface and override the life support and navigation. We don't need to understand their primitive machines. We just need to fly the ship." "Yes, Captain." The Scrav technician forced a universal splicing cable into the ship's data port. For a moment, the bridge lights flickered. The monitors blinked from their standard blue to a deep, warning amber. Growl leaned back, clicking his mandibles in satisfaction. Foolish Terrans. They build flying metal boxes and surrender them at the first sign of a predator. Prepare the jump drives. What Growl did not know, what no Scrav could possibly comprehend, was that human ships were not designed to be comfortable. They were heavily modified, restricted, and dialed back just to be legally allowed into galactic space. And Dominic Harper's final, imperceptible nod to his captain wasn't a sign of defeat. It was confirmation that the dead man's switch had been flipped. The first sign that something was wrong came 20 minutes after the Scrav took the bridge. Growl was reviewing the cargo manifest, translated by his datapad, when he felt a strange, dragging sensation in his lower thorax. He shifted in the uncomfortable human chair, trying to stretch his secondary legs, but they felt unusually heavy. He ignored it, attributing the lethargy to the stress of the boarding action. "Technician," Growl snapped, "why are the main thrusters still offline? We need to break orbit from this sector before the Vanguard patrols detect the distress beacon the humans were broadcasting." The technician at the helm turned, its compound eyes blinking sluggishly. "Captain, the system override was successful, but the ship's internal subroutines have rebooted to their factory defaults. I cannot stop it." "What does that mean?" Growl demanded, standing up. As he did, his knees buckled slightly. The floor felt as though it was pulling him downward with an aggressive, unseen force. "The artificial gravity," the technician gasped, bracing 2 of its arms against the heavy Boeing Stellar control console to keep from collapsing. "Galactic standard is 0, 6G, the humans. They had dampeners engaged to keep it there. When I bypassed the mainframe, the dampeners went offline. The ship is reverting to Terran standard gravity." "Which is what?" Growl hissed, his breathing growing labored. 10G, Captain. Almost double the galactic standard." Growl's mandibles clicked in shock. Double the gravity? How could the soft-skinned mammals survive in such a crushing environment? Every movement suddenly required twice the effort. His chitinous plates, designed for light, fast movements, now felt like lead weights strapped to his body. His heart rate spiked as his body struggled to pump hemolymph through his system against the relentless downward pull. But the gravity was only the first phase of the ship's automated reset. Down in the pitch-black cargo hold, Peyton Miller sat perfectly still, listening to the hum of the ship. The magnetic restraints bound his hands behind his back, but he was entirely at ease. "You feel that?" Abigail whispered from the darkness. "Yeah," Dominic replied, a grin evident in his voice. "The grav plating just cycled up to Earth. Normal. My bypass worked. The Scrav technician must have hard rebooted the system, trying to lock us out. The Galileo is currently scrubbing all foreign user inputs and returning to homeworld parameters." "How long until the environmental scrubbers cycle?" Peyton asked. "Give it 5 minutes, Cap," Dominic said. "Galactic standard atmosphere is heavily regulated. Mostly nitrogen, traces of argon, and about 12% oxygen. Anything higher is considered a severe fire hazard and highly toxic to most species in the sector." "An Earth standard?" Abigail asked, though she already knew the answer. 21% oxygen, Dominic said. To a Skrav, breathing our air is like inhaling vaporized bleach. Their lungs aren't built for that kind of aggressive oxidizer. Give it a few minutes, and they are going to feel like they are burning from the inside out. Back on the bridge, panic was beginning to take root. A loud, mechanical clunk echoed through the ventilation shafts, followed by the deep roar of the heavy-duty industrial fans kicking into overdrive. The air pouring out of the vents suddenly smelled sharp, metallic, and incredibly dense. One of the Skrav guards standing by the blast doors suddenly dropped its plasma rifle. The heavy weapon hit the deck with a loud crash. The guard clutched its thorax, its respiratory spiracles flaring wildly. It let out a high-pitched, wet shriek and collapsed to its knees, violently coughing up a viscous blue fluid. "What is happening to him?" Growl shouted, though his own voice sounded weak. His throat was burning. Every breath he took felt like he was inhaling fire. The air itself tasted aggressive, biting into the delicate membranes of his respiratory system. "Captain!" the technician cried out, its voice barely a whisper now. "The life support, the air mixture, it's flooding with oxygen. It's at 18% and climbing. It is toxic. We are suffocating in it." "Turn it off!" Growl roared, stumbling forward. The sheer effort of walking under 10G gravity, combined with the hyper-oxygenated air, sent a wave of agonizing cramps through his legs. He collapsed against the communication terminal, his claws scrabbling against the metal. "I cannot!" the technician wheezed, falling to the floor entirely. "The analog switches, they are manually locked out. The ship's AI considers our biological signature a contaminant. It is flushing the atmosphere to sanitize the vessel for its Terran crew." Graal's compound eyes wide with terror. This wasn't a freighter, it was a death trap, a floating pressure cooker filled with poison gas. How did the Terrans live like this? Their homeworld must be a hellscape of crushing gravity and corrosive air. "Get up!" Growl ordered his men, his voice trembling. "Get up! We must go down to the hold. We will force the Terran captain to reverse this. Drag him to the bridge if you have to." The remaining 4 Skrav warriors, trembling and exhausted, picked up their heavy rifles. They moved like the elderly, dragging their feet, their chests heaving in agony. The apex predators of the sector had been reduced to struggling, gasping wrecks in less than half an hour, simply by existing in a human environment. Growl led them to the lift, his mind racing. He would torture the humans. He would burn them piece by piece until they fixed the ship. He punched the button for the lower decks. But as the lift descended, Growl felt a creeping, instinctual dread. They were descending into the dark, into the high-gravity, hyper-oxygenated abyss where the demons lived. The lift doors scraped open on the subdeck. The air down here was even thicker, heavy with the smell of machine oil, ozone, and pure, concentrated oxygen. Growl and his 4 warriors stumbled out, their breathing ragged, wet, and desperate. Every step echoed loudly on the metal grating. They approached the reinforced door of the holding cell. Growl drew his personal plasma sidearm, his hand shaking violently from muscle fatigue. "Open it!" Growl wheezed to his lieutenant. The lieutenant fumbled with the control pad, overriding the magnetic lock. The heavy blast doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Growl raised his weapon, ready to scream his demands, ready to execute one of the crew to make a point. But the cell was completely dark. "Bring them out," Growl commanded, stepping back. 2 of the Skrav warriors staggered into the pitch-black room. There was a moment of dead silence. Then, a sickening crack echoed out, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. "Varn?" Growl called out, his voice cracking. "Varn, report!" A shape moved in the darkness. It was fast. Horrifyingly fast. Under 10G. The Skrav moved as if submerged in deep mud, fighting gravity and toxic air. But the humans? The humans were in their element. A hand shot out of the darkness, a pale, 5-fingered mammalian hand. It grabbed the second Skrav warrior by the throat. There was no struggle, no grand fight. The sheer kinetic density of human muscle, evolved on a high-gravity death world, was overwhelming. The humans simply squeezed, and the alien's chitinous neck plating shattered like cheap porcelain. The warrior was tossed aside casually, sliding across the deck plates. Growl backed away in sheer terror, his remaining 2 guards raising their rifles, their arms shaking so badly they couldn't aim. Out of the shadows stepped Captain Peyton Miller. The magnetic restraints that had bound his hands were gone shattered on the deck behind him. Beside him stood Dominic, holding a heavy, 2-foot-long steel hydrospanner, and Abigail, gripping a plasma welding torch. Peyton rolled his shoulders, cracking his neck. He took a deep breath of the 21% oxygen air, a look of immense satisfaction crossing his face. "You know, Captain Growl," Peyton said, his voice no longer the calm, submissive tone of a surrendered merchant, but a deep, resonant baritone that vibrated in the heavy air. "Fargo Orbital has a very strict non-aggression policy. We are instructed to surrender our vessels to avoid violent conflict. We let you take the ship because it was the safest thing for us to do." Growl leveled his plasma pistol at Peyton's chest. "Stop! Move back, mammal." Peyton took a slow, deliberate step forward. His boots clanged heavily against the deck. "But," Peyton continued, his eyes cold, "the policy also states that once hostile forces take control of the vessel and alter the ship's trajectory, the crew is authorized to enact self-defense protocols to reclaim corporate property." "Fire!" Growl screamed to his guards. The two Scrav pulled their triggers. A bolt of superheated plasma scorched past Peyton's shoulder, melting a groove into the bulkhead behind him. The other shot went wild, hitting the ceiling, as the guards' exhausted arms gave out from the recoil. Before they could fire again, Abigail moved. She didn't sprint. She simply closed the distance with a terrifying, heavy momentum. She swung the plasma welding torch, not using the flame, but using the heavy, solid brass battery casing at the base of the tool as a blunt instrument. It slammed into the nearest guard's chest plate. The kinetic force of a dense human swinging a heavy object in 1G gravity was devastating. The alien's thorax caved in with a wet crunch, and it collapsed, gasping for breath. Dominic didn't even use his hydrospanner. He simply tackled the remaining guard. The sheer weight of the human drove the alien into the metal floor. Dominic pinned the struggling creature, effortlessly holding down its 4 arms with just 2 of his own. Growl was alone. He stared in absolute horror at the Terran captain. These weren't soft, squishy mammals. They were dense, unstoppable kinetic juggernauts that breathed poison and thrived in crushing gravity. They didn't need blasters. They were the weapons. Growl turned and ran. He didn't care about his crew. He didn't care about the ship. He just needed to survive. He sprinted for the lift, his lungs screaming in agony, coughing up blue blood as the oxygen ravaged his system. He slammed his fist onto the lift button, the doors closing just as Peyton began to walk toward him. Not running, just walking. Like a predator stalking an exhausted, wounded animal. The lift shot upward. Growl collapsed onto the floor of the elevator, sobbing in terror. He crawled out onto the bridge. His technician was dead, slumped over the console, choked to death by the Earth Standard air. Growl pulled himself up to the communication terminal. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely operate the analog keys. He smashed his fist against the emergency broadband broadcast button. The screen flared to life, connecting to the Galactic Citadel's emergency Vanguard frequency. A crisp, blue-skinned Vanguard officer appeared on the screen. "This is Vanguard Sector Command. Identify yourself." This is Captain Growl of the Scrav Corsairs. Growl shrieked, tears of blue fluid streaming down his compound eyes. "I am broadcasting on open channels. We have committed acts of piracy. We surrender. We surrender completely to the Vanguard." The Vanguard officer looked confused. "Captain Growl, you are a wanted fugitive. Are you turning yourself in?" Yes, by the ancestors, yes," Growl begged, coughing violently, gripping the console as the sound of the lift returning to the bridge echoed behind him. "Trace this signal. Send your heavily armed cruisers. Arrest me. Put me in a maximum security containment cell." "Captain Growl, what is your status? Are you under attack by a rival syndicate?" "No!" Growl screamed, looking back at the heavy steel doors of the bridge lift as they slowly began to hiss open. The heavy, rhythmic sound of human boots stepping onto the metal deck echoed into the room. "I boarded a Terran freighter. Please. You have to save me. I am begging you. Come arrest me before the humans." The transmission cut to static as a heavy, pale hand reached out and casually crushed the communication console's power feed. Peyton Miller looked down at the weeping alien pirate, his expression entirely devoid of pity. Fargo Orbital thanks you for your cooperation, Peyton said coldly. Now, about my ship. Commander Bennett stood on the pristine, illuminated bridge of the Galactic Vanguard Interceptor Justice, staring in utter bewilderment at the main tactical display. Bennett, a seasoned veteran of the sector's law enforcement fleet, had spent his entire career hunting down Scrav pirate syndicates. The Scrav were ruthless, utilizing blitzkrieg tactics to overwhelm merchant vessels before the Vanguard could even power up their slipspace drives. Yet, here they were. A Scrav Corsair vessel was physically tethered to a blocky, ugly, utilitarian freighter registered to a human corporation called Fargo Orbital. The distress signal wasn't coming from the civilian ship. It was coming from the pirates. And it wasn't an automated beacon, it was a frantic, weeping broadcast on an open emergency channel. "Lieutenant Lawson," Bennett called out, his voice betraying his confusion. "Confirm the origin of that transmission again. Are you absolutely certain it came from Captain Growl? The same Growl who slaughtered the colony on Aegis Prime?" Lieutenant Lawson, a tactical officer with a sharp eye for sensor anomalies, nodded slowly. "Voice print analysis is a 100% match, Commander. It is Growl. But, sir, the bioscans we are pulling from the human freighter are completely erratic. The environment inside that vessel has been severely compromised." "Did the Scrav deploy biochemical weapons?" Bennett asked, his jaw tightening. If the pirates were using gas on a civilian crew, standard rules of engagement dictated lethal force. "No, sir," Lawson replied, her fingers dancing across the terminal. "The internal atmosphere of the freighter has been flooded with 21% oxygen. There are also high levels of nitrogen. Furthermore, the ship's artificial gravity is currently operating at 10 G. The atmospheric density is off the charts." Bennett blinked. "That's not a breached hull. That's a Class 4 Death World environment. The ship is simulating a toxic high-gravity biome. Did the environmental systems malfunction during the boarding?" "According to the ship's transponder data," Lawson said, squinting at the screen, "that is the standard baseline environment for Terran vessels. The humans call it Earth Normal. They intentionally live in those conditions." A heavy silence fell over the bridge of the Justice. Bennett had heard the rumors about the newly discovered Terran species. They hailed from a notoriously hostile system in the Orion Cygnus arm, a place where extreme gravity and corrosive atmospheric conditions were standard. But experiencing it secondhand via tactical telemetry was something entirely different. "Prepare a boarding party," Bennett ordered. "Issue heavy environmental hazard suits to all personnel. Maximum gravity dampeners on our boots, and triple filter the rebreathers. If we step onto that ship unprotected, our lungs will blister and we won't be able to lift our own weapons. Let's find out what happened to Growl." 20 minutes later, the Vanguard boarding shuttle clamped onto the human freighter's secondary airlock. Bennett and a squad of 6 heavily armed officers, encased in bulky, pressurized hazard suits, stepped into the USC Galileo. The moment they crossed the threshold, Bennett felt the oppressive weight of the Terran gravity. Even with the mechanical dampeners in his suit, assisting his movements, every step felt like walking through waist-deep water. The ambient hum of the ship's massive General Electric fusion engines vibrated through the floor plates, a deep, aggressive rumble that rattled his teeth. "Guns up, check your corners," Bennett ordered over the secure comms line. They moved methodically down the stark, tungsten-lined corridors. The ship lacked any aesthetic appeal. It was a pure, unadulterated marvel of industrial brutalism. Exposed pipes, thick bundles of wiring, and heavy steel bulkheads painted a picture of a species that valued survival and function over comfort. As they approached the main cargo bay, they found the first signs of conflict. A Scrav plasma rifle lay discarded on the metal grating. A few feet away, a patch of blue hemolymph was splattered against the wall. "Movement ahead. The main bridge," Lawson reported, tracking the thermal signatures on her wrist-mounted scanner. Bennett signaled for a breach. The Vanguard officers stacked up by the bridge doors. With a swift, coordinated motion, they bypassed the manual release and shoved the heavy doors open, their plasma carbines raised and ready. "Galactic Vanguard! Drop your weapons and secure your hands, Bennett barked through the external speakers of his hazard suit. What Bennett expected was a hostage situation. What he saw defied all tactical logic. Captain Peyton Miller sat casually in the command chair, his boots propped up on the edge of a Boeing Stellar navigational console. He was holding a steaming mug of Maxwell House synthetic coffee, calmly taking a sip. Beside him, the ship's engineer Dominic was leaning against a bulkhead, casually eating a handful of salted peanuts from a foil bag. Abigail, the tactical officer, was tapping away at her datapad, cross-referencing a cargo manifest. But it was the corner of the bridge that drew Bennett's immediate attention. Huddled together in a pathetic, trembling mass were the remaining members of a Grayson Scrov boarding party. They had been restrained with heavy-duty zip ties, the kind normally used for securing industrial cables. Among them was Captain Growl. The imposing, four-armed pirate warlord was curled into a fetal position. He was hyperventilating, his compound eyes darting wildly, a look of profound, shattered terror etched across his chitinous face. When Growl saw the Vanguard officers in their heavy hazard suits, he didn't try to flee. He didn't curse them. Instead, he let out a garbled shriek of absolute joy and violently threw himself toward Bennett's boots, squirming across the floor like a desperate insect. "Take me!" Growl sobbed, coughing violently as the hyper-oxygenated air assaulted his lungs. "Please, put me in the heavy isolation wards. Chain me to a wall in the deepest asteroid prison you have. Just get me off this cursed metal box. They are monsters. They don't use weapons, Commander. They just squeeze you until you break." Bennett stared down at the weeping pirate, completely stunned. He slowly lowered his carbine and looked back up at the humans. Peyton took another slow sip of his coffee, lowered his legs from the console, and offered a polite, professional smile. "Commander Bennett, I presume? Captain Peyton Miller, USC Galileo. We're very glad you're here. Fargo Orbital Protocol requires us to hand over all hostile trespassers to local authorities to avoid complicating our insurance claims with Lloyd's of London." "Captain Miller?" Bennett started, his voice wavering slightly. He looked at the shattered pirate crew, then at the entirely unharmed humans. What exactly happened here?" "They boarded us," Dominic chimed in, tossing another peanut into his mouth. "We surrendered gracefully. Then they tried to hack the mainframe to steal the ship. They tripped a hard reset protocol, which turned off their illegal environmental overrides and restored the ship to its factory settings. Earth normal. They spent 30 minutes in our air and gravity," Abigail added, not even looking up from her datapad. "Then they tried to shoot us when we told them they were violating corporate property rights. So, we had to subdue them using standard hand-to-hand occupational hazard techniques." "Occupational hazard techniques?" Bennett repeated, incredulous. "You decimated an elite pirate boarding party with your bare hands?" "And a hydrospanner," Dominic corrected helpfully, "but mostly just the hands. It turns out their exoskeletons are extremely brittle under 10G. They crack like dry twigs." Growl wailed in the background, a pathetic, high-pitched keening sound. "He threw Varn across the room. He just picked him up and threw him. They breathe poison, and their bones are made of iron. Arrest me! I confess to 100 counts of piracy. Just arrest me!" Bennett sighed, his tactical visor fogging slightly from his own sweat. He looked at his heavily armed squad, all of whom were staring at the humans with a newfound, profound sense of dread. "Lieutenant Lawson," Bennett said wearily, "take the prisoners into custody. Get them into our environmental containment pods before they suffocate." He turned back to Peyton. "Captain Miller, I am going to need you to power down your engines. We have a lot of paperwork to go through." The debriefing took place aboard the Vanguard Interceptor Justice, safely away from the crushing gravity of the human freighter. Captain Peyton Miller sat across a sleek, holographic interrogation table from Commander Bennett. Unlike the Scrav, who were currently residing in the medical bay, recovering from severe oxygen toxicity and blunt force trauma, Peyton looked perfectly relaxed. "Let me make sure I understand this perfectly, Captain Miller," Bennett said, pinching the bridge of his nose. He had been reviewing the legal and tactical reports for 3 hours, and his head was throbbing. "You are an unarmed commercial freighter. You carry no kinetic torpedoes, no plasma batteries, and no military-grade shielding." "That is correct, Commander," Peyton replied calmly. Fargo orbital logistics vessels are strictly civilian. Weapons are a liability and increase our transit tariffs at major hyperspace relays. Yet, Bennett continued, bringing up a holographic image of the Galileo's cargo manifest, your ship is constructed with hull plating thick enough to withstand a direct hit from a Class A dreadnought. Your engines, built by a company called General Electric, generate enough raw thrust to tear a standard frigate in half. And your internal atmospheric processors can flood the ship with a lethal oxidizer in less than 4 minutes. Earth normal atmosphere, Commander. It's what we breathe. And the gravity? Bennett said, leaning forward. Do you realize that setting your gravity dampeners to 0 effectively weaponizes your entire ship against 90% of the known species in this sector? Peyton smiled, a calm, corporate smile that sent a chill down Bennett's spine. Commander, human beings evolved on a planet with a gravity well of 9.8 meters per second squared. We require that gravity to maintain our bone density and cardiovascular health on long voyages. The fact that the Skrav find our natural habitat lethal is a biological tragedy, certainly, but it is not a weapon. It is an OSHA compliance standard. OSHA? Occupational Safety and Health Administration, Peyton explained. A Terran regulatory body. If I don't provide my crew with adequate gravity and oxygen, I get fined by the corporation. Bennett stared at the human. He tried to reconcile the polite, well-spoken merchant sitting in front of him with the apex predator that had effortlessly dismantled a Skrav warlord's crew. Captain Growl gave a full statement, Bennett said quietly. He claims your tactical officer crushed his lieutenant's thorax with a heavy construction tool. He claims your engineer pinned down a fully grown Skrav warrior using only his body weight. Growl is currently undergoing psychological evaluation because every time someone mentions the word Terran, he starts screaming. As I stated in my report, Peyton replied, pulling a neat stack of physical paper documents from his jacket, a bizarre human tradition of record-keeping. We acted purely in self-defense. The Skrav initiated hostile actions. We utilized the tools at hand. I believe my crew used a Caterpillar heavy-duty hydrospanner and a standard-issue plasma welding torch. These are maintenance tools, Commander, not weapons. Bennett reviewed the paperwork. The human was right. By every letter of galactic law, the USC Galileo was completely innocent. They hadn't fired a single shot. They hadn't used illegal munitions. They had simply existed in their natural state, and that natural state was a horrifying nightmare for anyone foolish enough to intrude upon it. There are no charges, Bennett finally admitted, terminating the holographic recording. You are free to go, Captain Miller. Your ship has been cleared for transit, and the Vanguard will tow the Skrav vessel to a secure impound lot. Thank you, Commander, Peyton said, standing up and smoothing his uniform. Fargo Orbital appreciates the prompt and professional response of the Galactic Vanguard. I will be sure to note your cooperation when we file our insurance claims. The Skrav plasma cutters did a number on our outer airlock's paint job. Lloyd's of London is going to want a full incident report to authorize the repainting. Bennett watched in disbelief as Peyton turned and walked out of the interrogation room. The human was more concerned about a scratched paint job than the fact that he had just single-handedly broken the most feared pirate syndicate in the Outer Rim. As Peyton returned to his ship and the Galileo slowly detached from the Vanguard cruiser, Bennett stood on his bridge, watching the blocky, ugly human vessel fire its massive thrusters. Commander, Lieutenant Lawson said softly, stepping up beside him, the Skrav vessel's databanks have been downloaded. We have their communication logs. It seems Growl managed to broadcast a warning to the rest of the Syndicate network before we jammed their signal. What kind of warning? Bennett asked. Lawson pulled up the transcript on the main display. It was a frantic, unencrypted message that had bounced across every pirate haven, black market outpost, and smuggler's den in the sector. To all Syndicate vessels. Do not engage Terran ships. Repeat, do not engage. They are not merchants. They are unstoppable kinetic demons. Their air is fire. Their gravity is death. Their tools are weapons. If you see a Terran ship, run. Bennett couldn't help but let out a low, dry chuckle. For centuries, the Vanguard had poured trillions of credits into building faster ships, bigger guns, and highly trained strike teams to combat the pirate menace in the Outer Rim. They had fought endless wars of attrition against the syndicates, trading blood for every parsec of safe space. And yet, it only took one ugly, blocky human freighter, built by corporations that cared more about insurance premiums and OSHA compliance than galactic politics, to terrify the underworld into submission. Lieutenant Lawson, Bennett said, turning his back to the viewport, as the Galileo jumped to slipspace, disappearing into the cosmic void. Yes, Commander? Update the Vanguard patrol mandates for the Outer Rim. I want all active interceptor wings to stand down on escorts for Terran commercial vessels. They don't need our protection. Lawson nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. Understood, sir. Shall I classify them as low-risk targets? No, Bennett replied, his eyes reflecting the blue glow of the tactical map. Classify them as class, 4 environmental hazards, and let the pirates know. If they decide to board a human ship again, the Vanguard won't be coming to rescue them. Out in the deep, cold expanse of the galaxy, the USC Galileo hummed along its designated trade route. In the cargo hold, millions of tons of industrial equipment sat secured in the dark. On the bridge, Dominic put his feet up on the console. Abigail returned to her datapad, and Captain Peyton Miller poured himself another cup of Maxwell House coffee. It was just another quiet Tuesday for Fargo Orbital. The galaxy was finally learning what humanity had known for centuries. If you pick a fight with the heavy machinery, you are going to get crushed. Did this tale of human engineering and crushing gravity leave you wanting more HFY action? The galaxy just learned a hard lesson. Never board a Terran freighter unless you want to experience the true meaning of a death world. If you enjoyed seeing these alien pirates beg for mercy, smash that like button. Drop a comment with your favorite moment and share this story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss another epic sci-fi adventure.
Hi, my name is Tran Trung, the owner and manager of Palace Truths. After watching the video, alien pirates captured a human ship. Now they are the ones begging the galaxy for rescue, _HFY_. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What I enjoyed most about this story was the shift in perspective once the pirates realised they had completely misunderstood humanity. At first, they saw humans as easy targets, but little by little, the fear started changing sides. That mix of tension, survival, and quiet confidence is what makes HFY stories so satisfying to me. I also think the story reminds us that arrogance can blind people to real danger. Sometimes, the strongest individuals are the ones who stay calm and underestimated until the situation truly matters. Do you think the pirates would have acted differently if they had known more about humans beforehand? And which moment made you realise the balance of power had completely changed? Thanks for spending time with Palace Truths today. If this story meant something to you, feel free to leave a comment and maybe like or subscribe for more HFY sci-fi stories like this.